Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now, following on from my recent interest in War at Sea, the Avalon Hill classic game, I had mentioned in the videos dealing with Victory in the Pacific and War at Sea secondarily that the system that had been designed back in the 70s continues to this day and has spawned a number of, I'll call it descendants really, which have taken on the core of the original Avalon Hill system and really, kept on reusing it and revamping it for different situations. And today I'm going to look at one of those games, and this is the effort known as Grand Fleet, designed by Steve Newberg and published by L2 Design Group, I think in about 2009. So this takes the system pioneered by War at Sea and turns the clock back a bit because it takes it back to the era of the First World War. And I quite like this game. I bought it around the time of the centenary of the Battle of Jutland because I just felt it was something I ought to do, really. Um, it certainly has a lot of presence. I mean, the box does at any rate. Look at that. That's no mean size for a game. So that's quite promising to start with. I must say, I do quite like the artwork. It's certainly very striking and a bit of a homage to slightly oldie worldy approaches, but it has a lot of presence, and I think that's great. And on the back of the box, you get a bit of a lengthy description of the background. It's really nice. They acknowledge the original inspiration from Avalon Hill and explain that this game changes the period and brings it forward. But even if you just glance at the map that they have shown you on the back of the box, you've got the area that really mattered to the British and German navies in the First World War, the area around the North Sea. There's the points of contention there. And you can see the lineage of this game in the victory point system, the old points of control with the sliding scale. Um, I don't know how visible they are on these, but you've got the little circles marking major bases, and you have little well, I say little, they're actually quite large on the actual map. You have these different sea zones, and victory in this game is all about securing control of those sea zones. And there's split victory point values. You get a certain figure in red if you're the Allies, you get the black victory points if you dominate that area as the Germans. And so it's quite nice, really. You've got a limited scope for Baltic operations. So although the Baltic is pretty much in the tiny corner of the map, there is the possibility the Russians can make trouble, the French can pitch in, and of course there's the United States too. Um, they also show you the battle board you get to aid tactical combat, shown much smaller than to scale, obviously. And then you get a nice breakdown of the ship counters. And now, because I've punched out all the counters and bagged them, it'll actually be quite nice if I can just show you them here. So people familiar with the War at Sea system will instantly see what's going on here. The first number on the left is the offensive value. The middle number is the defensive, value of the ship, and then the last one is its speed. So this is basically War at Sea, again, to those who may not be familiar with the system, it's a matter of rolling the number of dice shown on your offense value. You score damaging hits on a 6, you score a disabling hit on a 5, and there you go. But there are some additional wrinkles here because unlike the other games in this series, you have destroyer flotillas. You also have airships, which I think is a nice touch. And I think these don't just represent the lighter than air elements, they also represent your long-range maritime patrol assets. So the British, of course, went for blimps as opposed to full-on zeppelins like the Germans did. Now, they did indeed produce about half a dozen of their own rigid airships during the war, but they never really used them to the same level of effect that the Germans did. But you know, the fact that the British have them at all and that they're represented in the game is nice, I think. So you've got the ocean on which these silhouettes sit are coloured for nationality. So those are Russians up there. You've got French there, United States in green, of course British in tan, and German in dark grey. The ship silhouettes are really nice. Without going too over the top on the detail, they have actually taken the trouble to give you the silhouette of the particular ship that the counter represents. They've only simplified this when it comes to destroyer flotillas and submarine flotillas, and you also get some generic ships in the battle group counters. Now, the function of these is to save space. If you've created a battle group that has loads of ships in it, rather than stacking a ridiculous number of counters on the map, you can just substitute for one of those. So that's given us a bit of a glimpse of what's in the box, but let me wrestle with this thing and get the contents out. So you could see the map, the very, very nice map on the back of the box. But while that's a nice reproduction of what you get in the box, it doesn't really give you a sense of its size. So as is my wont when doing videos like this, I am going to, I've forgotten this map folds out in a bit of an unusual way. I have to be careful not to tear it. This is not a mounted map by any means. As you can see, it's thin cardboard, which is a little bit of a shame, but it's a nice looking map. And if I can just work out the, talk among yourselves while I work out the origami of this thing. There we go. There is the map. I'll just do a quick flyby so you can see in glorious detail all these things. I think the ports are a tiny bit clearer. They're the circles with the figure underneath in a square representing the repair points. And then if I just fold this thing down again, I think, have I done that right? Oh, cool. This is a puzzle in itself. Yep, so there we go. If I just zoom in on the critical areas for the Germans, you can probably see those victory point numbers a bit better now. So classic war at sea stuff. So you can see the difference in victory points for the zone. So of course, if you're German, dominating these is very easy. So you don't get many rewards for doing that. Now, of course, if you're the British and you somehow force your way into the Skagerrak, then hats off to you. I mean, well done. You deserve every one of those 5 victory points for holding that bit. What else is there? Oh yes, now original War at Sea modelled the U-boat war against commerce fairly well. And this game does the same. There is the option for for Germany to declare unrestricted submarine warfare. And those are the zones they then have to concentrate on for commerce raiding. They do get double points if they declare unrestricted submarine warfare. And those are the areas you can conduct anti-shipping strikes in. Now that's a nice touch because those are based on the historical densities of British and Entente merchant shipping, whereas you didn't get that same level of maritime trade in the North Sea, because that effectively was the war zone for surface fleets as well as submarines. So coastal trade maybe, but the real value is in attacking the heavy mercantile trade. So a nice map, a bit fiddly to deploy, and I have to be a bit careful. Every time I open it, there's a bit that I accidentally try to tear because it's a bit counterintuitive. What else have we got in this thing? Rulebook, pretty nice, pretty compact. The font size is a little bit small, but I think that's just me being a bit gripey because my eyes are starting to go in my old age. The rules themselves are actually pretty short. You're only looking at about, I'd say nine pages of rules. There's a nice example of play showing how scouting, tactical scouting and combat happens, because that's the really meaty part of the game. And then you have just over 2 pages of advanced and optional rules, which is nice. There's a lot there. Now, some of them are contradictory. So it actually says with some of those entries, if you choose this rule, you can't choose that rule because they clash. But it's nice to have the options, and there's clearly a lot there. The basic game in itself is pretty straightforward. So I imagine after a couple of games, you'd want to bolt these on. And the rest of it's a slightly odd designer's note, which is quite nice. It's well written and very informative, but there's also a lot of correspondence included between the designer and the play testers, which is not something I've seen in other games. So it strikes me as a bit unusual, but then it works very well. It gives you some interesting background. What else we got? Off-map holding boxes. So there we go. This is obviously the German one. So you can have up to 4 battle groups for the main body of the fleet. You can also have a number of Baltic battle groups, and you've got the scouting groups. Now, thematically in this game, as the German, you want to group your battle cruisers into that because of what it's called. You don't have to, it's just there for flavor, but I like that you have that option. And to be honest, when I play, I try and mirror the historical deployment. So I quite like that. Now, the British, of course, have the same thing. They've got the Grand Fleet and the Channel Fleet as well, which is very good. The only very minor gripe I have is the British called their sub-formations battle squadrons. So I understand why they've called them battle groups for the purposes of, basically keeping the game's terminology consistent. I can call it a squadron if it worries me that much, but it's quite nice because you can easily organize your fleets, and I really appreciate this. It's very considerate. There's a battle board, which, given what war at sea could be like, and in a game like Grand Fleet, where you'll be bringing lots of dreadnoughts to the party, hopefully, shows you how to line up your ships and how to line up your excess. And very realistically, I say, because they know what war at sea is like, there's an arrow to indicate that if you still have excess ships, that's the way they go off the map. Oh yes, and of course the French and the Russians have their own battle group organization table. Now, the reason they're here attached to the battle board is because they're not actually in the basic game. You can bring them in as optional extras. And so the basic game reflects the relatively low level of activity of these two fleets. Not to say they didn't do anything, but if you're mainly looking at a game about the Grand Fleet and the High Seas Fleet squaring off, these are little better than distractions. But if you want to bring them in, then nothing's stopping you. Written sequence of play card with some handy reminders on the reverse, which would be very useful. There is on Board Game Geek a flowchart version of that, which I've also printed off because sometimes having that sort of visual guide can be handy. Again, classic War at Sea fare with the counters. You've got damage markers with a little number to show how much damage they represent. Battle location marker for the map, sea control markers. Everything that veterans of the War at Sea series would recognize. The ship counters themselves are of a good size. These are the British ones, to give you an idea. So they're not too far off the size that was shown on the box. I like them. They're just colourful enough to be visually appealing, but they don't overdo it. These are nice, basic. Hidden movement, unlike original War at Sea, and indeed unlike Victory in the Pacific, this game brings in hidden movement, and that is where it really shines, I think, because you can see, as either the German or British player, large formations putting to sea, but thanks to this, you do not know what they are unless you make contact. These are the German ones. They look equally nice, same level of graphic excellence and, flag clearly displayed on the reverse. And as you can see, as with any First World War in the North Sea game, there is an awful lot of stuff. These are all markers and the French and Russian and US fleets. Both the British and the German case, I've had to divide the various fleets and flotillas over 2 bags because there's just so darned many of them. But yes, that is it. Aside from a few spare counters, if you want to make your own ships, presumably, or it might just have been the printing, and 1 dice. Somewhat unrealistically for this game, there was only 1 dice in the box. If you remember, I said you will roll 1 dice per offensive rating on a ship. So if I take Sevastopol here as an example, she'll be rolling 4 dice every time she fires. So you're going to need more dice for that. But there we go. That's the contents of the box. So thank you guys very much for tuning into this one. It's really lovely to see you as always. I hope this has caught your interest. It certainly did in 2016 when I first realized it was a thing. And I thought, well, if there's any year to buy yet another First World War naval game, particularly one centered on the North Sea, it's 2016. And yes, I did buy it in May 2016. So yeah, the next video, of course, as per standard, will be a partial playthrough just to demonstrate how this one works. For those of you who know War at Sea very well, again, there'll be not that much there to surprise you, but Steve Newberg has added a few wrinkles to capture that First World War feel, which does make this game stand out from other games in the War at Sea stable. So I will be having a look at how that works in the next video. But in the meantime, as always, if you've got any questions, comments, queries, please do put them down. I'll try not to be too slow about responding. But in any case, your company, as always, is much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.